Welcome to Catalyst Method, where we ignite understanding and make learning easier. In today's class, we continue from where we stopped. Posterior pituitary gland. The posterior pituitary gland is one of the division of pituitary gland, and it is also called neurohypophysis. Now, the posterior pituitary gland does not secrete hormone on its own. It only stores the hormone. The hormone are being secreted by the nerve cells of the hypothalamus, and they are being transported into the posterior pituitary gland through hypothalamo-hypophyseal tracts. Divisions of posterior pituitary gland. Posterior pituitary gland are divided into three parts. There is infundibular process, infundibular stem, and median eminence. Histology of the posterior pituitary gland. Posterior pituitary gland is majorly made up of two different types of cells: the pituitary and unmyelinated nerve fibers. The pituitary, they are derived from the glial cell, which serve as only protective cells. They are not participating in the neuron, and they are not participating in hormone secretion. While the unmyelinated nerve fibers, they arises from supraoptic nucleus and the paraventricular nucleus of hypothalamus, and they are those fibers that secrete the hormones. In addition to these pituitary and unmyelinated nerve fibers, they also have mast cells, blood vessels, and other type of cells as well. That is on the histology of the posterior pituitary gland. Now, hormones, as I've already said earlier, posterior pituitary gland does not secrete hormone on its own. It only stores the hormone that are being secreted by hypothalamus, and they usually call them neurohormones. Now, these hormones leave hypothalamus and reach the posterior pituitary gland through hypothalamo-hypophyseal tracts. The hormones are the oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. The hormones are the oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. This hormone, they need a protein, or they need a transporter that will transport them from the hypothalamus down to the posterior pituitary gland, and that substance is called neurophysin. There are two different types of neurophysin. There is neurophysin 1. That one is for oxytocin, is one that transports oxytocin, and there is neurophysin 2, the one that transports antidiuretic hormone. Now we'll go into this hormone one by one. Oxytocin is secreted by paraventricular nucleus of hypothalamus, and it is stored in the posterior pituitary gland. Oxytocin is a peptide hormone with 9 amino acids, and it has a half-life of about 8 to 10 minutes. Now, what are the actions of this oxytocin? Oxytocin has action. The actions of the oxytocin includes it acts on the mammary gland as well as on the uterus. Action of the oxytocin on the mammary gland is that it helps in the ejection of the milk. Oxytocin helps in the ejection of the milk. And how does it do that? It helps in the contraction of myoepithelium that are present in the alveoli of the mammary gland, thereby helps in the free flow of the milk into the exterior, that is to the nipple. Now, the milk ejection reflex is one of neuroendocrine reflex in our body. Neuroendocrine reflex is a type of reflex that begins with nervous stimulation and ends with the release of hormone. There are numerous touch receptors that are present in the mammary gland, particularly around the nipple. Now, when a baby is sucking the breast, the touch receptors will be stimulated. Then they will now send an impulse through the somatic afferent fibers into the hypothalamus, that is to the supraoptic and paraventricular nucleus, which will now send an impulse to the posterior pituitary gland to release oxytocin. Then the oxytocin released will now go into the mammary gland, leads to the contraction for the easy flow of the milk. This type of reflex is called neuroendocrine reflex. because it begins with impulse and terminates by the release of hormone. Now, action of oxytocin on the uterus. Action of oxytocin on the uterus. Oxytocin acts on both pregnant uterus and non-pregnant uterus. Pregnant uterus, oxytocin usually helps by contracting the uterus during childbirth. We should know that at the earlier stage of the pregnancy, oxytocin secretion is usually low due to estrogen and the progesterone. But at the later stage of the pregnancy, the oxytocin secretion increases due to a decrease in estrogen and progesterone. Now, during the process of the childbirth, there are many touch receptors that are present in the uterus. Now, as the baby is trying to come outside, these touch receptors will be activated. They will still send somatic afferent impulse into the paraventricular and supraoptic nucleus, which will now stimulate the release of the oxytocin. The oxytocin secretion increases until the end of the childbirth. Now, oxytocin secretion also stimulates the release of prostaglandin from the placenta, which will intensify the contraction that is initiated by oxytocin itself. That is all in oxytocin. Now, regulation of the oxytocin. Regulation of the oxytocin is through positive feedback mechanism, because its secretion will not end until the end of the event. Moving on to antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone is secreted by supraoptic nucleus of hypothalamus, though it is also secreted a small quantity by paraventricular nuclei of the paraventricular nuclei of hypothalamus. It is also a peptide hormone with 9 amino acids. It has a half-life of about 20 minutes. Now, antidiuretic hormone has two major functions. It serves as it helps in water retention as well as vasopressor. Now, in this water retention, the antidiuretic hormone acts on the kidney, that is the kidney tubules, the distal convoluted tubule and the proximal convoluted tubule. It allows them to perform a facultative reabsorption of the water. Absent of antidiuretic hormone, the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct, they are impermeable to the water. Now, what is the mode of action of the antidiuretic hormone on these renal tubules? The antidiuretic hormone acts on V2 receptors, which will regulate a water channel protein called aquaporins, thereby allowing this renal tubule, the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct to regulate the water channel protein called the aquaporins, and thereby allow the convoluted tubule and the collecting duct to reabsorb water. Another action of the antidiuretic hormone is vasopressor. But before it can perform a vasopressing action, it's needed in larger quantity. It has a vasoconstriction action, particularly on the arteries, which can lead to high blood pressure. The mode of action of antidiuretic hormone as a vasopressor is that it activates or acts through V1A receptors. Next is regulation of antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone are majorly regulated by two main mechanisms. They are being regulated if there is a decrease in extracellular fluid, or regulated if there is an increase in osmolar concentration of the blood or of the body fluid. Now, if there is decrease in the body fluid, then the antidiuretic hormone will be released so that there will be a facultative reabsorption of the water. And if there is increase in osmolar concentration, there are what they call osmoreceptors. The osmoreceptors are located in the hypothalamus, closer to the paraventricular and supraoptic nucleus. They are the receptors that recognize changes in the osmolar concentration of our blood. Once osmoreceptor detected that there is an increase in osmolar concentration of the blood, they will send signal to the paraventricular and supraoptic nucleus, which will stimulate the release of which stimulate the release of antidiuretic hormone. The antidiuretic hormone release will travels to the kidney, activate water channel protein in the proximal convoluted tubule and the collecting water, which will lead to the facultative reabsorption of the water that will bring about the balance of osmolar concentration in the osmolar concentration of the extracellular fluid. What I'll be discussing on the posterior pituitary gland is applied physiology. Under the applied physiology of posterior pituitary gland, there is hyperactivity of the posterior pituitary gland and hypoactivity of the posterior pituitary gland. Under the hyperactivity of posterior pituitary gland, there is what they call syndrome of inappropriate hypersecretion of antidiuretic hormone. This syndrome of inappropriate hypersecretion of antidiuretic hormone is a disorder that is characterized by loss of sodium through urine. It is usually caused due to the tumors, either the cerebral tumor, the lung tumor, or the lung cancer, because the cancer and the tumor cell, they also secrete antidiuretic hormone. So hypersecretion of this antidiuretic hormone as a result of the tumor or cancer cells is referred to as syndrome of inappropriate hypersecretion of antidiuretic hormone. Now, for the hypoactivity of posterior pituitary gland, it is what we call diabetes insipidus. That is what we call as diabetes insipidus. The diabetes insipidus is a disorder that is characterized by too much passing out of water through urine. And the passing out of too much of water through urine is called diuresis, and usually occur as a result of decrease in antidiuretic hormone, and it can usually be caused by either there is a lesion of supraoptic or paraventricular atrophy of posterior pituitary gland, or lack of the receptors of this hormone in the renal tubules. If it is occurred due to a renal effect, it is called nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. In this type of a condition, there is a normal secretion of antidiuretic hormone, but the receptors, that is V2 receptors that are present on the distal convoluted tubule and the connecting dots, are not there to function properly. Now, the diabetes insipidus, it is usually characterized by that there is polyuria, that is excessive urine, polydipsia, feeling thirst, and dehydration. So, we have come to the end of the pituitary gland. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Thanks.